Okay, welcome everyone to the Flux Dev Meeting. It's October 9th, 2024. Do we
Hey,
have any?
so
Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I think we want to discuss a little bit. I want to discuss a little bit items that we so there are some pull requests that were made and we haven't managed to merge them for Flux 2.4 release. And I wanted to discuss a little bit those work items and see if we can get them merged now. And also discuss a little bit about the roadmap and next milestones. Sorry, I wasn't here last meeting. I had to drive. So for me will be 4916, the pull request on Flux 2 around Flux diff artifact, which I think is a very nice addition to the CLI and can improve a lot the OCI user experience. I was reviewing it today and I found it adds some dependencies which we can't actually take in. One is a repo from Bitbucket with no license, no clear license. So you can't have that. And another one is a Go text diff from GitHub that was archived. Sunny, did you had in mind a particular Go diff package for this
We
that's
discussed
actually
about
maintained?
no, we discussed about how do we do this. I similar to the left comment they left. The comment they left. They did some research. They found out that this library has a unified diff implementation, but it was archived earlier this year. And I did that research as well, and then I found out that somebody forked the archive and started maintaining another version of it, which is taken from the latest version of Upstream Go, which I shared a few months ago, that there's just one file we can copy and maintain ourselves. It's not exported, it's in Upstream Go. That's what I recommended to them. And after that, they did their own search, and I think they stopped at the archive repository itself, and they imported it and implemented it. I don't think we need to do that. Just one file, and we need modifications, we need coloring and any other features we want. So we have to take the ownership of that code. So I'm for copying the one file from upstream instead of depending on an archive repository.
Cool. Okay. So can you add this comment here as a comment as a reply to my own comment where I said this package no longer maintained, so we can't use it.
There are a
I'm
few more
also
things.
there is this string set stuff that I really don't understand why we need it.
String set.
Yeah, that we need to figure out how to get rid of it.
What does it do? Creates a slice? What is it? Why do you need a separate data type for it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I need to read it. Where is
I can go
actually
through it
this?
and see. But I wanted to discuss with you before replying to them. The other thing I wanted to discuss was still allowing an external binary to be executed. Last time we discussed it, we said we don't need it. We can have one way of doing a unified diff for non-YAML files. But none. And I commented that we don't need that. We have one way of doing it. We don't need to execute an external binary. But for some reason, they still kept the environment variable that will allow it to CLI to execute. What do you do about it?
if the generic unified diff using Go libraries works for any kind of,
Text file.
for a, not only text file, right? It's about three changes and how you represent that. Also the let's say you move things from one directory to another, or you rename a directory. Like these types of file system structure is well represented by Git diff or Linux diff. I'm not sure if the generic diff that only looks at the content of the file also captures the differences, the changes in like renaming or stuff like that.
Initially, I was thinking that maybe we should add this detection of renames. Looked it up how Git is doing. Seems like Git is not 100% sure that something gets renamed. It's based on some estimation that maybe this, if you're comparing this, it's a rename. It's not like 100% you can say that something has been renamed. And considering that, I feel, do we really need it? It's just a diff. You say your file name was this and you change it to this. You can say it's a new file, fine. If it's the same file and content changes, you show the
Right.
diff. I don't think there's a use
Yeah.
case for it.
But since the way we consume an LCI artifact, we have to specify a path, like if you use a customization with it, you specify a path inside the artifact, right? So file paths are taken into account. So I guess having a diff that is aware of differences in file paths and stuff like
That would be
useful.
respected. It's not like
Oh.
randomly just file name. File
Oh,
path
cool.
would be respected. But
Cool.
if you're renaming it, just say it's a new file.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I want to see how it goes, right? I have a structure, a base directory with some YAML, then overlay directory, and in the overlay directory I have, I don't know, staging, production 1, production 2, right? This is the classical way of creating overlays, and this is what most Flux users are doing. Now you modify something, not necessarily as a content of the patches or everything, but you refactor. Let's say you merge the two production patches into one, and you add, I don't know, a Flux variable substitution, right? To get rid of all production 1, production 2, you only have production, and you merge the two and you add, I don't know, the domain prefix as a var sum. So this is kind of a usual, a good use case for how would you refactor, and you would not only change the content of the file, you would rename files and move them in the structure. So I think for this type of change, people really need to see that a new path is created with that content and the old path has been removed, right? So if in the diff, if we have the whole path of all the operations, like, okay, overlays, production 1, patch.yaml got deleted, and production page 1 is added, I think that's enough. If you can also see the whole, the path from the root of the artifact to the file, not just the name of the file. Because if we see, oh, patch 1 was deleted here, patch 1 was added here, without having the path relative to the artifact root, then it's not that useful, because you can't tell, oh, how is this change actually affecting the Flux customizations that refer a particular overlay, right? So if our generic div prints the name of the files along with their relative paths to the artifact root, I think we are fine on saying this was added, this was deleted, without saying this was renamed or whatever, right? It's fine.
The Go package, the upstream one, it doesn't deal with file paths. We have to write that code. And I think they have written it here. It just, you give two sets of strings, it will do a diff. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, same as yeah, that's I remember we talked about this before, right? So I really think it's necessary for us to add the whole path to it. Because just showing content is not enough. And if we can have that, then we don't need to shell exec anymore, and we can remove the third option of give us your diff binary.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, like, I think there are many tools that use that allow you to diff something, that do that allow you to choose which diff tool to use. So I mean, I don't think it's super necessary. I think it's fine to just use a library and do not show exec. But I just wanted to remember you guys of these use case, right? Like people like to choose which binary of diff to use. So is that something we can safely discard? Like I'm fine with it, of course.
We don't shell exec from the CLI. That will be the first time we do it. We have
Okay.
Flux diff customization, which does diffing. We don't allow people to specify a diff. So my major concern is now if we add shell exec, which opens the possibility of numerous security incidents, because now we are going to be able to accept random binaries. People then see, oh, if I can use here some random binary for diff, why doesn't Flux diff customization allows it? And you have to add it there as well and everywhere. So I would really like us to avoid this situation if our Go diff, the generic one, is good enough. If we can't make that good enough and we can't show paths and so on, then yes, we have to add this shell exec. But I'll really try very hard to avoid shell exec because we don't do that anywhere in Flux, right? And it's if we are going with shell exec, we need to have a RFC process in place and explain why we are opening this can of worms. Why is it necessarily needed? And I don't think it's needed if we can.
Yeah. In that case, I think the benefits are not strong enough, to be honest.
Yeah. If we can copy one file, add a little bit of logic to the path, that would be ideal. So we don't have any more Go dependencies to what we already have. We just copy one file and we modify to inject paths. That would be really, really great if we can do this. And of course, the Diffie implementation that's already in there, that's what I expect 99% of the people to use. Because if you do customize overlays and if it's YAML, you should always use the YAML diff, right? Because it shows exactly, it has that nice view, it has coloring, it has everything. What we are talking here is you don't have YAML, you have some other things, Terraform or whatever, where we need to switch to plain text diffing.
I'm looking for any existing tool that does this OCI diff. There is a project called diff OCI, but it doesn't look like they show the content that has changed, but just the file names.
Diff OCI, it's about layers. When you compare, like, from some base, you then install some packages, then you add your binary at the end. that project is around comparing layers and stuff like that, which doesn't apply at all to OCR artifacts, how we use it in Flux, where we know that the content is text, and that text means something, gets reconciled on the cluster, right? But for container images, I actually use that project to figure out why that my image is so big after I released a new version and stuff like that. It's quite useful to compare layers. We have one layer, right? Everything is in there, so it's more about text comparison in our use case.
And if somebody has more specific use cases, they can just download and do their own diff. Flux need not do everything.
Yeah, you can actually do right now Flux pull of the current artifact, then
Run whatever
use
you want.
git diff this directory versus this other directory where you did the pull. Yeah, you can actually do it. But I mean, it's a nice feature to have if we don't add more dependencies, if we don't shell exec. If we can do these two things, I think it's a good addition to the CLI. If we can't do it and we add more dependencies and we have to shell exec, like you said, maybe we should just write a blog post or some piece of documentation. Hey, how you can do this on your own using your preferred diff tool. This is how you can do it. You run 2 Flux commands, then you run diff on the 2 local directories that are created by Flux pool.
Okay.
Okay, so to resume, to recap, not going to add this yet to the next milestone. You will write some comments there and see where it goes. If it goes in the right direction and we eliminate the 2 things, only then we are going to add it to the roadmap. So we are not promising users, yes, you'll have a Flux diff artifact semantic comparison until we figure out the pull request.
I will review and leave a comment. It has a big scope. Okay, I'll review and leave a comment. Next thing. Should I start the next thing? I have another thing I have to discuss.
Yes.
So in notification controller, I think you've seen Kevin added common expression language code for receiver to be able to, what do you call it? Select a specific resource that should be reconciled when the receiver is triggered. And I was going through it. Looks good to me. The reasoning why we are adding it looks good to me. But there are I still have to look into how do we handle specific situations. So the existing example has the incoming request will have some data which we will manipulate to get the name of the target resource to be reconciled. There may be situations where the incoming data may not have the exact content that can be used to form the name of the resource that needs to be reconciled. Your repository is A, your resource name is X. How do you convert A to X? Don't know if it can be done in cell. Do you know? Maybe we need to do some research.
Like, is there
Some
ternary?
mapping? Some
It is.
kind.
You can do, you don't have if something, you have the condition, test, then condition, and you don't have a switch. You have 2 conditions with an or between them, but you have if and else, and you have switch. In cell, it's just non-intuitive.
Okay.
because the keywords don't exist, but you can combine this from conditions. So you can say body image equals
Contains something.
contains something, return this string. And when you return that string, then you return the Flux object. So if it contains X, return A, and A is the name of the Git repo. But I really think we should ask Kevin to add documentation to this and have an example for this use case and a test. So it's obvious that, okay, you can do split, you can extract a name from image URL, split by, I don't know, you remove the tag, or maybe the image is a prefix or a suffix. The Flux object name is in a prefix or a suffix of the OCI name. But what if it's a totally different thing? How do you write the if switch condition? I know it's possible. I've seen how you write ifs and switches in Cell, but I think it will be good to have a test for it, so we know for sure it works. But yeah, it's definitely a valid use case. People shouldn't be forced to preserve the name or have some part of the image name in the Flux object.
Yeah, basically they should be able to make decisions with the content of the payload and decide whatever resource they want to reconcile in the end, right?
Yeah. The example is now parsing and extracting
The image from
part
a
a
string.
part of the string part, right? And use that. What if it's a total different thing? Then you need to have some matching based on a name and return a new stuff. So that's, I'm not an expert on Cell, but I truly think it's possible because I've seen it in some admission webhook, validation webhook. I'm also thinking of having a Cell evaluator package in our runtime package, because we want to use Cell in other places, so we shouldn't write the eval functions everywhere. But we can do this later on and extract the validation part from the receiver handler. Yeah, this is another problem here. We use Cell Go, but we should be using the Cell package from Kubernetes instead of the Cell Go SDK. That has more functions than the base one, but because we import Kubernetes packages, we should be using the Kubernetes Cell package and not Google Cell directly. But anyway, this can come as a refactoring afterwards, are just small details. So Sunny, what you are saying is that this pull request, once it's ready for review, we should add it to the roadmap, right?
Yeah.
And this is modifying receiver, which is V1. So everything here should be optional. Yes, it's optional. Yes, it is. Okay. All good. Doesn't mess up anything. Oh, wait. Hmm. We need to make resources optional also, right?
Isn't expression selecting resources from the resources list? You give this set of resources that can be selected using the expression.
No. If you
No.
look at the implementation, it can be anything, right? You don't need to specify. You can specify both these resources and this expression for other resources, but the expressions are not something that filters the hard-coded resources. It's something that determines from the payload the resource name and then tries to find it on the cluster. So basically, we should remove the required field here and write a cell validation on the CRD where we do an OR validation.
The initial discussion about why we need this was about a receiver comes and it triggers all the resources in that receiver. And people just wanted to trigger only a few of those resources. But now you're saying you don't need to mention the resources, you can trigger anything. That's broadening the reach of, or is that a good thing? Should we do that? You're limiting it initially, but now you're widening what the reach of that receiver. It can reconcile anything. Can that be used for bad? Maybe the input can be manipulated in such a way that the expression will lead to triggering something that need not be triggered.
So reading the source code, this is what I understand. It doesn't act as a filter on the resources that you specify. It just determines random names and tries to reconcile them.
But
And maybe that's not great. Maybe it should act as a filter for the things that you have listed in there.
In the receiver.
Receiver resources.
Yeah, so you specify a list of tons of stuff. You create one receiver. So this is the issue, right? If you have 3 Git repositories, people don't want to create 3 receivers. They want to create one receiver, and the receiver should be smart enough from the payload of from the JSON payload, which one of the resources it should trigger. So it should act as a filter on existing resources and not be able to do whatever.
So yeah, one thing that Kevin put on the PR was what to do with the resources field when introducing the resource expressions field, which has the list of cell expressions. And from what I understand of his intention of doing it would be the two fields would be the same thing. But yeah, so you're saying that we should actually use both, but with different semantics. Like resources is like, oh, these are the resources that this receiver can reconcile, and the list of
No,
cell expressions. No,
no. So spec resources specifies, and it still requires, specifies all the resources that by default get reconciled. limit, to filter this list, you can specify resource expressions, and that will parse the payload and filter the resources list that you've passed to some of them, not all of them. So by default, it's all of them, and expressions is maybe resource expressions is not the
Filter expression.
Right.
the
Yeah, I was
right,
gonna suggest that. Maybe we should change the name of this
and
field,
add
right?
filter as resource filters filter,
Right.
which is an array of expressions from which you filter the listed resources.
Right. And
So we
one question.
scope it down to that. And if we do that, then we don't have to change in any way the API. Resources is still a required field like before. We just add an optional field and that's it.
Right. And and I guess nothing would change as well because I think the resources, the spectral resources accepts wildcards, right? For the names of the objects, I think. Like you don't
No.
have to. No?
Wildcards are for
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah. I don't have an
alerts,
example.
not.
Oh, right, right. You're right. Yeah, yeah, there's no wildcards here. Okay. Yeah, so it sounds good. Like resource filters. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Alert has wildcards, receiver doesn't. Right. So basically what this changes from what Kevin was initially thinking is that every resource that you want to reconcile through the receiver and have that resource evaluated as from the cell expressions is that you must declare that resource on the list, right? Like you have to be explicit about what resources can be reconciled through the receiver. It's kind of a security thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
new
I
name.
added a small comment on this, but feel free to expand on it because Kevin will probably ask why, whatever. But I suggested the renaming to resource filter, and I said this should filter the existing resources, not do random reconciliation on anything.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's move to the next topic.
One more thing regarding the filter. That also leaves space for in future if there is another cell like expression or some way to filter things we can add. It's a resource filter. We can expand the definition of what can be in the filter. So if we need to, just say.
Mm.
I don't have any other topic. We can discuss other things.
Okay, let's.
Caching.
Yeah, so I would really like us to implement the GitHub app thing.
Oh, Don't know if you've seen last week, Dipti was here. She asked about that, and we showed her the another repository we had in community to organize.
Mhm.
Show that we just use it. Okay, and I said for caching, whenever we are ready with the cache, we can add it. For now, just implement it, similar to what we did for our show. We will hear from her next week. Maybe.
So Dipti will implement the GitHub app authentication.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay. What about GitLab app?
Don't know. Maybe the contributor who is adding this artifact can help. I think they're from GitLab.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh.
Cool.
Is
What
it the
is
same
left?
person
So
who fixed the condition? We had the issue with the
yeah,
conditions, right? Is it the same person?
yeah, he's from GitLab. Yeah. What other things did we have in RFC 007?
We have to remove the AWS part from the code commit.
Oh yeah, let me edit Dipti's issue and delete code commit from here. Okay, so it's only GCP left.
GCP also has a proof of concept that Sule created. There's a repository he created just for testing. So if anybody wants to, they can refer to that and implement.
Or GCP.
GCP. Just the authentication part is there.
Yeah, I will leave the GCP for next year. If we can get, I'll be more than happy with GitLab and GitHub for next release. If we can get that in.
Do you know if GitLab is doing anything new with their Flux integration? Haven't heard any news for many months now.
Yes, I've met with them at Open Source Summit, and they are working on UI improvements, like showing Flux objects, stuff like that. And I think they will, if it's not already there, they'll have the mockups on their public repo. And when that happens, I'll ping you. So yeah, we can give them feedback. But I've seen some mockups and it looks really nice. Another thing that we should be testing, I know Kingdom did a bunch of tests for it, is the headlamp plugin. So the headlamp plugin is, the goal there is to offer with GitOps UI users an alternative that's maintained. So there is a table there with all the with UI features and how they are implemented in headlamp. So if any of you have time to run headlamp using Kingdom's example on a test cluster and just report to them any issues that you found. It's what I really like about the headlamp plugin is the fact that usually when something goes wrong with Flux, it's not Flux fault. It's usually if a deployment doesn't roll out, it's usually not Flux that is not able to run it out. It's some, let's say, leafness check fails, healthness check fails, something fails. And it's in 99% of the cases is the app which is at fault.
So
Right.
it shows that this app is failing instead of Flux resources failing.
So no, this shows you, let's say this customization fails or this ham release fails. Then you click on it, then you see a list of Kubernetes objects, part of that customization or ham release. And then you click on, oh, okay, this deployment actually has timeout. You click on the deployment, then it gives you the headlamp UI, which is, battle tested. That's what headlamp does, is showing you the deployments, the pods. You can shell exec in the pods. You can tail the logs. You can look at the pods events, all the things that you need to do outside of Flux to diagnose why is that deployment stuck. And they already have this thing sorted. I mean, Headlamp is a competitor to Kubernetes dashboard, and it shows all the information that Kubernetes dashboard displays, which is what you actually need to figure out what's wrong with your app. If you don't have, let's say, if you don't have a good monitoring system for your apps, so you don't have something like log aggregation or dashboards and all of that. If you don't instrument your app so the app reports, hey, this is what's going wrong with me, you need to actually, tail the logs, shell exec in the pod and do whatever, run commands there or whatever you need to do to fix it, right? And basically Headlamp creates this bridge between, a Flux thing fail, how I'm getting now to the actual app and debug it, and it's right there. It's 2 clicks away, right? It's and for Headlamp users, it's a lot of value if there is an intersection between Headlamp users and Flux users. For them is the best solution out there. They use one thing, right? They don't have to install 2 dashboards, figure out 2 ways of doing authentication for the dashboard and so on. Another nice thing about Headlamp that with GitOps didn't have is the macOS app or the Linux app. So it runs locally as an application on your desktop, and it allows you to select between clusters. It basically loads all your kube configs, and you can switch from one cluster to another. So if you have dev stage in production and you have it installed as an app on your local machine and you have access to all these clusters, maybe you read only on prod and the others cluster, I mean, you can use one dashboard and switch between the clusters, which is, yet again, I think something that's really needed for, people
Does
that
the UI run entirely on client side? Like it doesn't have an API for it? Like does it talk directly to the cluster? To the cluster
no,
API?
they
They
talk to
do
the
have,
Kubernetes API.
but there's like there isn't a backend for front end, like an API only to implement the features of the client, like the, I don't know, React code. So they do talk directly to the Kubernetes API. There's no middle thing.
I think they have it. I think there is.
Oh, okay.
There is. It's client side, client and server.
Mm. Gotcha.
I have not
Okay.
used, I think Lens did the same, and even Octant, what was it? The VMware project. It did the same for client side only.
So the backend is written in Go,
Mhm.
and there is a backend that has caching, all the things. There
Got
is in the main repo, you'll see a backend directory.
Does it integrate with Kubernetes Airbag? Like,
Yeah, of course. It uses you can log in with a service account token. You can do OEDC, and if you set up OEDC for Kubernetes, it can use that. Yeah, it has all of that sorted out.
But like, if it's just my user, like my email, my work email, can I use that as a user in Kubernetes? Like in Kubernetes, you can add RBAC like roles. You can bind roles and cluster roles to a user, right? There's the concept of a user or a group.
So you set up Keycloak and you have OEDC for Kubernetes API, right? You can authenticate with your GitHub username and you can set up Keycloak to give you
You can
rights
have like
based on,
Google Groups, and you can have like
yeah,
Google Groups have
yeah,
roles
all of
in
that.
the
Yeah, of
cluster.
course, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and HandLab
Nice.
works with that. Also with GitOps used to work with that. It's not that complicated to integrate with Keycloak. And
Got it. Nice.
yeah, so you definitely are not it's not a cluster admin only thing. You can actually have users with like Flux tenants, right? That may be on dev cluster, they only have write access to their namespace, and on the production cluster, they only have read access and only to their namespace and all of that. So you can actually get a external identity like GitHub, Google, whatever, and assign RBAC to it and have these two integrate in the UI.
Pretty cool.
It works. It's a lot of configuration. Kingdom knows best about it. You need to do a bunch of stuff to get this running. It's not straightforward, but it works. That's the
Nice.
thing.
I still have some
Uh,
strange issues in my testing. It shows that Flux isn't installed when Flux is definitely installed. I think I need to just dive into the code and figure out why. I think debugging is probably easier when you run it locally. I've just been focusing on running it in Kubernetes, so the hard parts are you have to get your plugins loaded into a persistent volume, and I have a repo you can follow if you just want to kubectl apply and get Flux installing it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Around that thing. So how we do it upstream in the CLI? So to determine if Flux is installed, we query the custom resource definitions and we query for the Git repository CRD, not custom resource. If the CRD is there, then Flux is installed. How we determine where is Flux installed is based on the labels on the custom resource definition. So if they don't do that, and I'm guessing if they copy paste it from Wikitops, it doesn't do like that, it will not work unless you do Flux Bootstrap. Because they expect something, I don't know, I think they look at namespaces or they expect the Flux system namespace or something like that. But you don't need to know the namespace, because if you do a kubectl get the YAML of the Git repository custom resource definition, you'll see that there are two labels there added to that CRD that tells you Flux and where is Flux installed. So that's how they should do it as well. And it will work with Flux operator, it will work with Flux install from Helm or whatever, right? Because we also, in the Flux CLI, we also tell you, how did you install Flux? Because there is that managed by label that we look at. Managed by can be Helm, can be Flux operator, or if it's empty, but it has the customization labels, then it's Flux Bootstrap or Flux install CLI. All that logic is not complicated. It's just a little bit of if-else stuff. Anyway, you can, Kingdom, if you haven't figured out where it is, I can ping me and I'll look at their code.
Okay, so it should just find the CRD first and then look at the labels on the CRD. That's
yes.
where all right, okay.
Yes, instead of searching for namespaces or anything like that. Right?
It actually does find the CRDs. That's the only panel that works. So I'll
Yeah,
I'll just-
because the CRDs are not namespaced, right? That's why it finds. But then it doesn't look at the CRDs to determine where Flux is installed. I think it looks for the Flux system namespace. And in your case, I'm guessing you install it with Cozy Stack or whatever, and it's a different, they use a different namespace for Flux, and that's why nothing works.
Yeah, there's two
Because they
use
assume
cases
it's a Flux namespace.
that I'm focused on. The first is Cozy Stack, where we haven't done the proper multi-tenancy lockdown yet, because tenants tend to be on their own Kubernetes cluster, isolated that way, so we don't need the multi-tenancy flag.
Mhm.
And then the other is OpenShift, and I actually did get it installed on OpenShift as a tenant in a tenant namespace. And there's just a checkbox. You have to go into the config and say, I haven't found a way to set this declaratively, but you have to say allowed namespaces, and then it just works. Anyway, I'll put the link in the dev meeting notes.
Okay, we're on time. We can continue with the roadmap discussion at the next meeting. We still need to figure out many other things. Sunny, do you want to refactor the caching?
Well,
Simplify it?
I have the thing I proposed. Should be just changing the interface and function names now. And do it.
Yeah, we talked about it. I looked at it. I think it's fine. We can completely remove the Kubernetes packages and dependencies from there. We don't need them. Even if someone wants to cache Kubernetes objects, they can still do it with your interface, right? You do the to JSON on your own before, and you put it in there, and that's it. So you don't really need that interface. And I'm perfectly fine with making breaking changes to all the packages that have now the caching inside, like removing the caching flags that Sule added. I'm fine with it. We'll just bump the version number, and that's it. But let's simplify. Let's get a version that we are happy with and it's easy to reason in package, and then we can think about how to properly use it in Git and the OCI client. Or maybe, yeah, it's a two-step thing, right? Some parts will be in the client, some other parts will be instantiation and everything in the controller. Because you don't want the client to instantiate the whole cache storage.
Every single time. The other part, the thing that we need to discuss and design about, like where and what should be the key of the cache. Those things, I think maybe no need of an RFC, just an issue with all the details, and we can discuss in an issue. It'll have all the details in it.
And I think the issue should be in package, because it's not, even if let's say 80% it's around source control, we still have the desire at some point to get rid of Bolt and use it in image repository as well. So let's not make it about source control. Let's just list all the, oh, I want to cache OCI tokens, Git tokens for Git repos, Helm index files, and tags coming from a container registry. But there are two different use cases. One is caching the token of a container registry, of a registry URL. And another use case is caching after you use the cache for authentication, then you cache the tags for that particular image. And the difference, I mean, there is no difference between the two because both of them expire at some point. We use BallDB with an expiry for tags as well. So there are, I think the only cache that doesn't expire is the Helm index one. Maybe. It's first in, first out, or is buffered or something like that.
Okay. I'm not promising anything you'll see in a week, but soon I'll have a issue. It'll not be complete. I'll just need your help to fill in the details. I'll start the things, list the sections, points, and we can add more to it, like we did for image automation when we refactored it.
Yep. Yeah, I think what's important right now is definitely figuring out what format we need, what constraints we have when we need to cache authentication tokens, right? Multi-tenant, not multi-tenant. There's a right. We need to cache the whole string. We don't need to cache the key should only be the like. I thought first time I've seen all of that. Oh, we should just cache the organization name, right? Because it's the same authentication. But then no, because yeah, you can have different permissions on the same repo, which is part of the same organization. Makes sense in a way, but it doesn't make sense from a workload, Kubernetes workload identity, where you have a single identity. So how would you have one identity that can, for the same repo, have read access, but also have write access? I don't think it's possible. But then if we do what Matteo suggested, oh no, we should allow service account names and then impersonate another service account using the workload identity, then yes, then you have this difference. So the cache key should actually combine all of these elements and combine. But yeah, we need to lay it out and see all these possibilities, what they entail, because whatever we decide for caching has to take into consideration what Matteo was proposing to do this impersonation per object, right? And if we design the cache in a way that's per workload, then we need to rewrite everything again when we do the per object. So we need to figure out caching that supports all the use cases that we have today and all the things that we want to do in the future, and not rewrite again everything. We haven't used it yet, and we are discussing a rewrite. So we really need to avoid doing a third rewrite. Okay. It's great seeing you, and I'll see you at the next meeting. Bye, everybody.
Right. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.